So Borderlands 4 is going to be coming with quite a lot of changes or new additions when compared to other entries in the Borderlands franchise, many of these being focused around the base gameplay and gunplay. But I think I've been able to glean some additional new elements that we have not gotten fully revealed to us yet, but have been teased by some of the gameplay and some developer information. So that's what I want to go over in this video, and this is going to be focused on combat pickups. Now, we've had combat pickups in previous Borderlands games, one of the most common ones just being health vials, where out of different loot containers or just picking up off of enemies, you can get these health vials that when you pick them up, they just heal you some. And it seems that this style of system is actually being expanded upon going into Borderlands 4, which will actually tie into a much more gameplay focused Borderlands game, because going into Borderlands 4, we're having much bigger skill trees, we're having a lot more movement elements, we're having many more buttons to just use commonly while in combat. So it seems they are really trying to improve the base combat in many different ways. And I think some of the combat pickups we're going to go over is going to help in that quite a bit as well. Now, the first two combat pickups are exactly what you would expect, and it seems we've seen both of these in gameplay so far. One is health vials, which you just pick up, they give you some health. The second one just being shield regeneration pickups, which you just pick them up and it regenerates some of your shield. Both of these seem to have a red beam, indicating that they are just combat pickups, so you can get them out of chests or just defeat enemies. They can randomly drop them, and you go in a certain radius and it's gonna auto pick them up. Those are kind of base things that we've seen in previous Borderlands games, and these are nice to have in combat, especially since I think Borderlands 4 is going to have the highest density of enemies we've seen from any Borderlands game so far. And I think not only are we going to have a much higher density of enemies, but I think enemies are going to be more difficult in general. Like, they're going to have more things you're going to have to keep an eye out for, and I think boss fights are going to be a lot more intricate and difficult. And I think one of the reasons this is the case is because they're giving us a lot more tools to deal with everything in the game. So we have these combat pickups. We also have the rep kit, which is a new gear slot. This is essentially like a repair kit that could either give you health or shielding back, or it could buff up some other aspect of your build, give you increased elemental damage or movement speed or something like that. So that's a big piece of it. Then we would have these two first combat pickups, but then that also brings us into what I think is going to be the third combat pickup. And I think the third combat pickup is going to be the new Ordinite element. Now, if you haven't heard about this, we actually got this revealed to us in some gameplay. We didn't know exactly what it was, but it had an orange or legendary loot beam on it. And we later got it revealed by Randy Pitchford that this was in fact called Ordinite, kind of a similar thing to Iridium. But at the most recent PAX East panel, where some Gearbox developers were at, we actually got it revealed that Ordinite is not going to be a currency, but it seems to in some way be tied to the Timekeeper and his forces, and is in some way tied to explosives or exploding things. Now, all of this being added together, and specifically it being tied to explosives and not being a currency, I think this is a combat pickup, because it not being a currency means it's probably not something we'd be storing in our inventory. If it was something that was stored in our inventory, it would almost certainly be a currency, because I doubt they're going to be giving us like consumables. That's one thing it could be, is it goes in your inventory and it's a consumable. I don't really think that's going to be the case. I don't think they want you have to go into your inventory to use a consumable, then go back out. I don't really think that's a gameplay loop they want. And since it's not a currency, it's not going to be something we're going to be storing in our inventory to use on something. So I think Ordinite is going to be a combat pickup, but that begs the question, what would this combat pickup actually do? And I think this is tied to one of the new systems of Borderlands 4. And that new system being the new Ordinance slot. And if you don't know what this is, there is a new specific slot called Ordinance that is used up by either your grenade mod, a rocket launcher, a heavy machine gun, or any other heavy weapons. And you get one of these slots. So you're going to be choosing between a grenade mod, a rocket launcher, a minigun, a heavy laser gun, or any of the other heavy weapons. And instead instead of relying on ammo, this slot is now cooldown based. So if you're using grenades, you have a certain amount of charges of grenades that when you use one, it starts to refresh at. You can use them all. If you're using, say, a rocket launcher, you can pull it out, use a certain amount of rockets, then it goes on cooldown. Once the cooldown's up, you can use it again, and there's no ammo tied to it. Now, this system at a baseline does a handful of things. First off, it allows anything in this slot to actually be strong all of the time. They specifically talked about grenades when talking about this, that in previous Borderlands games, especially 3, if you weren't a full grenade build, grenades were kind of useless. It was either for debuffing or healing you, and most of the time you just want to use them because they weren't strong enough. Having it in a cooldown slot like this means it can make them a lot stronger, and this goes for all of the other weapons. It could be in the slot like rocket launchers or heavy machine guns. They also want you, when specifically talking about heavy weapons, to use them much more frequently instead of saving it for, say, a boss fight or elite enemies. But since this slot is on a cooldown, you can't really go around and try to get ammo for your grenades or rocket launchers anymore to be able to use them more frequently. But what they could have done is added this new Ordinance combat pickup that when you defeat an enemy and it drops this Ordinate resource, you go and auto pick it up when you get close enough, and then it reduces the cooldown of your Ordinance slot. This would play into their seeming big focus on combat and the base gameplay in Borderlands 4, and would just allow you to keep that flow in combat, where instead of needing to stop and try to go pick up health or sit in a corner and heal or anything like that, or maybe sit in a corner to wait for your Ordinance cooldown, now just continuing to defeat enemies can give you health drops, shield drops, or Ordinite drops to reduce the cooldown of your Ordinance. And obviously they have kind of similar names, so that does play into it, but I do think that's what this new element is actually going to be doing. And the developers have also talked about trying to give us the most options possible when it comes to the gameplay and build crafting in Borderlands 4. They've talked about allowing us to make builds that are more focused on open world farming instead of boss farming, which sounds like it's going to be more movement based. We know the skill trees are going to be much bigger than previous games. We know that weapons and other slots that can work with the new weapon part system is just going to give a lot more options than previous games. And we do also know there is a new shield type called armor in Borderlands 4 that is supposed to be more offensively focused. We're not exactly sure how it works, but there seems to be some chance while in combat for some of your shield to just regenerate. We don't know if it's like on kill or if it's taking damage. It just has a chance to regenerate, but it sounds like this new shield type is designed around trying to keep you in combat. And if they're adding in a new shield type, they probably want to give you a reason to at least try it out. So they may also be trying to build that into this new kind of play style of being super offensively focused and super aggressive, which would play into having health regen, shield regen, and this Ordinance slot cooldown reduction all as combat drops. So you mix all of that together and you could make a really aggressive, offensively focused build that plays a bit more into utilizing all of these new elements. Now, if this is the case that these Ordinite drops reduce your Ordinance cooldown, I think there may be Ordinance focused builds, because we do also know that it seems that everything in your Ordinance slot or whatever item you're using in that slot will also be part of the weapon parts system. Now, the developers only confirmed this specifically for grenade mods, but all of the other things in the slot used to be in your weapon slot, so it would make sense that they still have weapon parts as those, and it wouldn't make sense for grenades to be the only thing that plays into the weapon part system in that slot, because if that was the case, you probably wouldn't use like rocket launchers or the heavy machine guns if they cannot be part of the weapon parts system. So with that being the case, and being able to get legendary items in the slot that could have crazy strong random rolls, I think there's definitely going to be some Ordinance focused builds. I still think there's probably a guaranteed chance that there are other things through other pieces of gear or through the Ordinance slot itself that would be able to reduce the cooldown of your Ordinance slot normally, but that this Ordinite would also be another part of that. So just being more aggressively focused would allow you to reduce the cooldown of your Ordinance slot even more, getting these pickups. There may even be some effects that allow you to increase the chance of getting Ordinite as a drop. So I do think that that will be the main use for this new Ordinite element. There will probably be lore pieces tied into this as well. Maybe it'll be tied into the story, but I think as a gameplay element, this will be what Ordinite is actually for. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.